I'm Ryan Grove. This is my wife, Tiffany Grove. We've been having a conversation about the true nature of the shape of our world. Last night we got into of a, a little bit of the Bible and to try to see if there was some sort of insight we could glimpse through passages of the Bible. And it went really smooth. So why don't we just continue our conversation? And I'm assuming you have something to say.
Well, I have been really hard on you, honey. And I do want to pay you like a little compliment because I did
That's nice
mention that you're basically absolutely science illiterate. And that's, it's not your fault, I feel like. But what I think is cute about you is I remember a time when you believed in the planet X.
Yeah.
Vociferously.
'Cause I'm open-minded.
Yeah. And so
I'm willing to allow new information to come in and be processed by my consideration, and I have no abject refusal to resist any new idea that might be posed to me.
yeah,
So
so
thank you.
you took a lot of time taking in that pseudoscience information and you were able to articulate it very well,
Yeah.
which to me says that you actually have an interest in how things work and how the world works, which is cute. I mean, that's a remnant of our childhood. We are curious and we want to know how things work. So,
And if
at least
old Sheppy went to school and got a science degree, he might be able to turn that into something legitimate. Thank you for that compliment. All right, that's nice of you. Thank you.
But what I was going to say was that's actually, remember we talked about Richard Feynman and I had read his book, The Joy of Finding Things
Joy
Out.
of finding things out. Yep.
Although,
Yep.
to be fair, I had to skip 2 of the long chapters on computers, and I forget what the other chapter was, but they were just right above my head.
Yeah.
I know nothing about computers. But he mentioned his father, and so I've also heard people out there say, oh, he's a flat earther. I hope you keep him away from the
Who,
children.
Feynman's father is a flat earther?
No, I mean, in regard to you, I've heard people say, he's a flat earther, you better keep him away from the children, and blah, blah, blah. So I just wanted to point out...
Who said that?
Oh, people just say that in
You mean in like
debates.
comments or relatives?
No, in debates about the flat earth, a lot of the comments are,
Okay. All right. Well, whatever.
keep him away from the children.
To each his
and-
own. Everyone's
yeah.
entitled to their own opinion. So yeah, go on.
So I wanted to point out that, kids are pretty resilient and intelligent, and they're going to make their own way. But what I thought was cute about the book, The Pleasure of Finding Things Out by Richard Feynman, was that he talked about his father, and he said that his father actually introduced him to the love of science. And we know that he's very dedicated to his field, and he's a charming man. He's a wonderful teacher, and the first to express, that there's a lot we don't know. But he said about his father that growing up, he kind of gained his first love of science because his father would take him for walks and whatnot.
All right,
and
that's
he would
charming,
try
but
to-
where are you going with this?
he would try to explain the natural wonders of the universe by pointing things out to his son in nature and saying, oh, this works like this or that. And
And maybe one
Feynman
day
said that his
you'll
father
grow
was
up
actually
and
wrong.
you'll invent a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. But Feynman said that his father Feynman said that his father in these little lectures was usually always wrong about how the science worked behind the phenomena.
Oh, that's funny.
And so it's not
So
that...
you're giving me the same endearing
Yeah.
treatment
It's not that his father...
as your husband, because I mean well.
that Richard Feynman gave to his father.
And you're the Feynman Junior in this scenario, and I'm the senior in this scenario.
If I could be so bold.
That's good stuff.
But I'm just saying, his father had an interest and a love of the world around him, and he related it to his son. And although his explanations for the phenomena were always wrong, it led Richard to really want to find out what was the driving factor behind, or the structure, or the functions behind this interest.
What a really
in the vast
roundabout
universe.
compliment that is.
Yeah.
What a strange way to compliment somebody.
But,
Thank you.
if Richard Feynman can love his father,
Oh, well,
even
then
though
you can
he was
love me.
always wrong in his
Then you
scientific
can love me.
endeavors,
Yeah.
then there must be... And his father produced a wonderful, charming man, intelligent, scientifically astute. So I think we don't have to worry about the flat earthers
Tinny
out
Means
there
Whale.
influencing
Tinny
our-
Means Whale.
No, I just mean that...
And it's that Ernest
I think
Meaning Whale
that the
that counts for
comments
something,
that
despite all of his
I hope you
lunatic-like...
keep-
All
Yeah,
right, you know what?
What I mean is that I think that the comments that I see a lot of times in these discussions about, oh, he's dangerous to the children or whatnot, are just ridiculous.
Well, thank goodness that you believe
Yeah.
that. Uh-huh. Wow,
So,
do you have something to talk about,
think
though?
that actually
Rather than, like,
people out there
weirdly
say, well,
complimenting, insulting me
people
at the same
that
time?
have no respect for science will not ever, or they'll never listen, is one thing that people say. And they also say that people that have no respect for science might taint the minds of others. And I'm here to say that I just don't believe that. I feel like if somebody wants to believe something that defies logic, that they're going to do that regardless of your influence or the influence of another person.
You see, parents, your kids are safe with me.
Well, so I wanted to give you a little compliment. Like, even Richard
That's great.
Feynman's dad didn't know.
All right, so what are we going to talk
But he
about?
tried to just make
Thank
stuff
you.
up.
I mean,
and
that is really...
it
That's
instilled a love of
touching.
science in others.
That's touching.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. No, thank you. So what do we... what would you like to discuss?
Well, you were talking about that you thought that the firmament in the Bible implies that there's a dome over the earth.
Only... Not
Dome
because...
sky.
Not because of the term rakia itself, but because of other references where it says it's like a tent, or it's like this covering or that covering. There's several references to it that all sort of point towards that general shape or function.
It doesn't have to be a tent.
It's not the word rakia itself alone.
Yeah, it's not the word tent. It can just be a fabric stretched out, like the fabric of space-time, which I mentioned in one of our earlier discussions.
Mm-hmm.
But there's many times where the word firmament is used in the Bible, and it's not referring
Idiomatically
to our
and literally.
sky.
And it's up to us to figure out
For
which is being
example,
employed.
Psalm 150, verse 1. Praise ye the Lord, praise God in his sanctuary, praise him in the firmament of his power.
Yeah, it's an idiom. Once again, talking about the all-encompassing covering that is the rakia, the firmament. The Bible is using that understanding of rakia idiomatically or metaphorically to describe also that it represents God's all-encompassing omnipresence and love and understanding of all things that go on down below.
Well, I think the number of times that we see rakia used in the Bible, we can begin to understand that it probably refers to something that has been spread out.
Yeah,
This
like a
is why
tent.
many modern
or covering.
translations render the word rakia as expanse. And I think that's very fitting and suiting for the expanse of the universe.
Well, when you read
and
the Bible,
fabric
you have to have
of space-time.
two or more witnesses in order for something to be
I
legitimate.
agree. I was going to mention that earlier when you had your one pop quote
And
about
so
this Bible.
we would have to
verse.
find other times where that's true. And then we would
Well,
also
I have other times.
we
where
would
that's
also
true.
have to
I have many other
figure
times.
out where the dividing line is between us understanding the metaphor versus what God means when he created the rakia in Genesis, which doesn't seem to be much of a metaphor when it's the beginning So you haven't established any sources for metaphor at that point. You're just laying the foundation from which further biblical metaphors begin to draw from as it accumulates and proceeds, through the whole chronology of the narrative of the Bible.
Well, if we look at the Bible from an evolutionary perspective, and the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest,
Yeah.
it really does kind of nicely and loosely follow the
I know
evolutionary
there's
model.
water first, and then there's the dividing of the waters above and the waters below. Yeah, that works great with evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few days later, then the 2 lanterns are put in the sky. Yeah, that's super, super evolutionary.
Yeah, and you know why I think so? Because the Bible starts out and it says that
I'm being facetious when I say that, by the way,
Of
in
course.
case I didn't make that clear.
But the Bible starts out and says that the earth was without form and void, which could have been what the earth was like after the cataclysm that destroyed the dinosaurs, because we know that man did not coexist with dinosaurs.
That is such an
So the
imaginary
earth was without form and void, and the sky was opaque.
conjecture,
And
it might be a good one.
after the waters,
But that's just your idea. Period.
and we had a different atmosphere.
We should
at
find
that
some
time.
subsequent biblical verses that would support that, if that were to even be considered to be true. But
Why?
go on.
Because God's creation starts with man.
Yeah, but you need
like
more than
we've
2
already-
witnesses, and that's how you use. That's how you
Okay,
cross-reference
that's fine.
and understand
That's fine.
metaphors versus
My point
idioms when you read the Bible.
that the creation story actually nicely fits with the evolutionary theory, because we know that probably the first life existed in maybe a thermal heat vent in the ocean, some kind of cyanobacteria. So, the earth was without form and void. The dinosaurs were destroyed. And then we have life beginning all over again. And the atmosphere was opaque. And then we could see the sun and the
Yeah,
moon.
but Genesis is the beginning. It's not here. We're gonna.
And then we had the fish,
He says in the beginning.
birds.
In the beginning, there's nothing.
which come right after the dinosaurs.
The void, whatever, the deep. I don't understand how you think that dinosaurs could have been created in the world, created for them, and the plants and trees, and then they all die out, and then Genesis picks up from that point when it's clearly the beginning. It's the
I would say
generation of reality.
Of man. It's the beginning of man.
Well, before you can have
Created in
man, you have
God's
to have a
image and
place for
likeness.
man to exist in. So
Right.
it's the generation of everything.
But the same reason that he might not
And there's
discuss,
only waters above.
Right. But the same
waters
reason
below.
that he might not discuss why the earth was without form and void, like the cataclysm that destroyed the dinosaurs, is for the same reason that in the Old Testament, God very rarely ever mentions the names that are not relevant to the message of the text. So we don't know who the Pharaoh was. We don't know who Moses is. We don't know who Adam
So,
and Eve
so
are.
according to that line of thought,
Because
then
all of those names are descriptors. They're not their actual names.
right, they're titles
Yeah.
like Nimrod, hated by God or whatever.
Right. We
right,
don't
right.
get to know. Their
However,
name doesn't get to be. in the
however,
Bible.
according to that way of thinking, then it would be legitimate for a hypothetical Bible to be started with Noah. When all that stuff's gone, and it's the the genesis of this age and this time post flood, right? So he could actually start there, and that would be.
But he didn't.
No, he didn't. But I'm just saying, in order to understand what you're saying, that would also equally legitimize the hypothetical idea that creation could have started then with Noah. Because not all the dinosaurs are dead, but all the wicked men, and there's nobody good, and they're all dead, and now Noah, and it begins after a great cataclysm, like what you're saying.
Well, I think Noah is the remnant of Adam's seed.
Well, clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly he is.
Yeah.
Well, I was just asking if that... I mean, then you could kind of do that too. I mean, you would be able to believe
And that
Genesis
makes sense
starting
why
with
there would
Noah.
be giants in the earth. That would be like the Neanderthal, which we know that our DNA is mixed with theirs, or Cro-Magnon man, or the other Homo sapiens that were or hominids, I mean, that were around at that
Well,
time.
all I'm getting
Or
at,
Homo
all I'm getting at is that there's no indication or reason to think that God started
Well,
at
it's just
some
not relevant
at
to
some
the Bible.
later point
Because
from
the Bible's not a science text. It's
no,
just not relevant.
but God does. Well, it's super relevant because
what
first
is
of all,
relevant is our
God
spiritual
God
life.
starts His Word in the beginning of us understanding Christ and our relationship to Christ and Christ's relationship to us and what His purpose is. In the end, He starts it with His initial creation of everything, and by doing that, what He establishes is He begins to establish his
Dominance.
resume of being almighty, omnipotent,
Well, he is almighty and
omnipresent, and he starts it
the
off
creator of
all by saying,
everything.
"Look, I
Sure.
started all of this, and this is the beginning." Boom, and I think that the later texts, would support that idea a lot more than it would support like some point after time had began, but something happened, but that's all over now, so I'm going to call this the beginning.
To the text.
Well,
so why would he need to?
Well, he brought it up. God brought it up with Genesis,
But there's a
so
lot
there
of
must
stuff
be
he
some
didn't
relevance.
Bring up
There's
about the earth.
Yeah, I know, right? So what he did bring up must have some sort of relevant
Right.
point
So that we should know that God
that we
created
should
all things.
know in order to understand
Yeah.
fully who he is and who Christ is and who
that
we are
he
and
took
what's going
special
on.
time in creating man, and that we were the only creatures created in his image and likeness. So those are the things we
So
need to know.
if being smart or really intelligent
say,
or
well, he
talented
did it
is
like
rare,
this,
and
you know.
most people are not that way, yet the Bible is written for all people, and if it's written for all people, we all have equal value. Do you think that he would communicate just to the smartest people that
No,
can figure?
that's why I think that the Bible is not a science text, and it's not concerned with the hows. and wherefore.
Nor is the nature of our reality neglected, according to how I understand some of the Bible verses. So most people are not going to be super talented or super geniuses, and that's what most of us are. And it's go out, multiply, fill the earth.
Yeah,
He
that's
wants
why
as
the
much,
Bible
many
is
of
so
us as we can,
beautiful.
because
Yeah.
so if he's trying to reach out with his word by inspiring people to make the Bible over the centuries, don't you think that word would be geared essentially for most people and not require some sort of degree
the Bible
or
is certainly an everyman text.
that's right.
Sure.
And so I think that you have to keep that in mind when you try to figure out what's a metaphor or an idiom and what's literal, and if it is an idiom and it's one that's not obvious to most people generally, and it takes a philosopher or a theologian to kind of interpret and figure out for us, that seems incongruent.
Well,
To me, to what the Bible is meant for
the Bible
and
is
who it's meant
multi-layered,
for.
so you can always go deeper into the text.
For sure,
If that's
for
your
sure. But the main message should be
affinity
clear
or ability
and attainable.
to do.
And I don't think that God doesn't address the nature of a reality. I think that it started with the deep, and he went across the face of the deep and separated the waters, and dry land appeared. And then I think it's just pretty much like he said. He's not out to trick children into believing fairy tales. The reason we think they're fairy
I
tales.
don't feel tricked.
The reason we think they're fairy tales is
feel
because our society
I think
is
it's
so
one of the
full.
most beautiful-
You cussed last night, so I'm going to say our society and Western philosophy and understanding of reality is is such bullshit that if we believe that, then when we go back to the precepts, the simple precepts that God just said very simply in Genesis, that they look ridiculous because of that. Because we think that the world is something very, 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 very different, when in fact it's just that
people
one.
can't read a story and take it for its face value rather than trying to read into
Yeah, but
it.
when you
Stuff that's
when you
not
tell
true.
somebody this is a story from God, that's not
Yeah,
just a story
that's how
from
I read it.
anyone.
That's how I read it.
There's
It's
something
a story from God.
significant
Yeah.
and exceptional about that example, and it has to be treated as such, and that has to be considered as you proceed to try to understand it. Anyway,
But it's
that's just my idea.
Look, when Jesus came, he came and he talked about
Flat Earth
farmers.
detectives are going to be super disappointed with the content in this video, although I think that it's totally worth continuing. I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, all right, this one
Well,
isn't
we
necessarily
are
flat
talking
Earth.
about.
But in order to understand, how reality is, we take into consideration the Bible and science and all that stuff. So anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
So Jesus told parables. He didn't come here and discourse some sort of scientific text. There were parables that people could understand. Yeah, we don't need to know how the world was formed. We don't need to know if it's a globe or flat to be able to love.
Right.
And
yes, I agree. And when he spoke those parables to the common people, I think he made it quite clear and used the vernacular in a way, and the people that were listening knew that it was a parable. But I think when he was sitting with Nicodemus and he said, "What? You're supposed to be a scholar of Judaism, and you marvel at when I say you need to be born. A man must be born again in order to enter the kingdom of God." That's not a parable. That's literal. And yet Nicodemus was trying to figure out what sort of parable the master might be speaking to him in that context. But if you understand that God is trying to talk to people, he's not trying to trick them. He's not going to let a lot of people not understand what he's going to say because they think that it's something he says is a parable when they should be taking it literally. I think that every comment in every statement of fact and every parable is intentionally, deliberately, and successfully executed on the proper audience at the proper time.
But again, it's not to be physically born again. It's a spiritual birth, just like the text is.
Right, that's just what Nicodemus said. Should I enter my mother's womb a second time? Right. And God's like, well, no, look, you're a master of. You realize that the body is arbitrary when it comes to the spiritual reality or the soul of someone. And so to be reborn again spiritually is still not a metaphor. It's something that needs to literally, actually, and 100% be done.
So when Max Planck said
I don't metaphorically have to be born again. I just wanted to be clear. But I really actually have to be born again spiritually.
But it's a spiritual text, not a
that's more real according to Christ's perspective than this mortal coil.
And when Max Planck, who was a devout Christian, quantum physicist,
I know a little bit about Max Planck,
understood the beauty of the universe and the different aspects of our reality. He was just in awe of God. So it didn't hinder his relationship with God even remotely. But
it sure made a lot of Christians think that mathematical reason, because he is a physicist,
Genesis and feel like, oh, this defies my physical calculations or whatever. He embraced it because he recognized the beauty of God's creation language. And there's a beauty in the universe.
And in doing that,
and I think shame on you.
Of course you do. You always do. He's giving legitimacy to the mathematical, philosophical, physics conclusion that there is a universe, and how brilliantly it's been expressed to him, because he's never been out there to see it. He's only learned this. Max Planck, he didn't have NASA and
Max Planck didn't do any experiments. Well, he didn't use the scientific method, right?
Well, he may or may not have. However, what I'm saying is that his opinion is like a celebrity endorsing a product. It gives suddenly credibility to what he's talking about.
So that would be the logical fallacy.
If that was something that were integral,
you're accusing me of a logical fallacy.
If that were something integral, no, I'm giving you a story problem. A story problem.
Fallacy.
Right, you're just saying to me what I said to you last night.
No, you're telling me that I'm making an appeal to authority, logical.
Okay, well, anyway, what I'm saying, you're attributing that to Max Planck in his conclusion by saying, "Oh, it is beautiful and stuff." You haven't seen it. He hasn't seen it. You only, if he could have seen it at all to say it's so beautiful, he could have only seen it in a mathematical, on paper, abstract sort of conclusion way, rather than a first-hand experience way. And what I'm saying is that him saying I'm a Christian, and him being as notable and remarkable of a man as he was, for him to say that suddenly gives credibility to all kinds of smart college-age Christians or whatever that are struggling kind of with this a little bit as they learn more and more and more and more about the mathematics and the physics and the philosophy of the paradigm that's given to us and taught to us by the institutions and colleges and stuff that are in charge of all that. That is kind of the same thing as a celebrity endorsing some sort of product for somebody else. And so people are going to want to buy that product. It might be smart people, dumb people, rich people, poor people. There's just some certain demographic that's going to buy that product. And now, if that were actually important or something that we should consider, don't you think that Christ would have exhibited something like that? But no, because all of this exterior physical reality through which, life and history has that's the costume that it's donned. Christ never once really marked any significance in looking at the world from that way. Everything that he did that was relevant and significant was ignoring all that and going right into somebody's soul. And he's always talking about somebody's soul. And so I think that
we know that Christ created the universe.
I'm just trying to create a context.
And that the universe and everything in it is the work of his hands. So in a way, you're negating Christ when you say
that is so lame.
When you say that Christ never
go ahead.
mentioned anything about that, because he did. I mean, he's the creator of it. What's the more tangible evidence, your words or your actions?
All right, well then that's what Genesis is him telling us right off the bat how he did it. Boom. In the beginning.
Or that he did do it. He
separated.
It was the word of his power.
Honey, it sure was. John, the Gospel of John, John 1 will reaffirm that.
But that has a scientific expression.
But it's
because science is just a tool. It's the measurement of the...
right, and it's because of the wisdom of men that God chooses the foolishness of preaching to get his ideas across. Because we get so wrapped up in this freaking vain nonsense of intellectualism and stuff that we lose what's important, and that's caring about the poor.
Why are you here hammering away at the flat earth if that's what's important? If that's not important, and it's the foolishness
I don't understand the question. Start again.
If it's the foolishness of preaching, and and what does Paul say? We're supposed to preach Christ crucified, Christ resurrected, and daily bearing the cross of Christ and the death of the flesh. Then what are you doing here preaching or whatever? Proselytizing.
All right, let
about
me answer that question. Let me answer that. Is that
I'm actually detracting people from the faith.
I'm actually not out there talking to anyone about it. All I'm doing is having a singular conversation about it with my wife that happens to be filmed or whatever, videotaped. I'm not out there preaching it or nothing like that.
Give a message of Christ,
so that's not true.
That's not the message.
It's not, and that's why I don't waste my time with it. But this is a really fun curiosity, and I think that there's a lot of merit to both sides, and I think it's something worthy of conversation, debate, and contemplation between people. I really do. So let's leave it at that for now. It's getting juicy, but I think that we both need to reload and sort of reconsider what's up. So until next time, and thank you for watching. If you really watched.